I would certainly hope so.
Fighting for liberty with threats of blood and toil. And when our rights were threatened, the cry was here and more. Hurrah for the monument flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern rights, hurrah. Hurrah for the monument flag that bears a single star. As long as the Union was faithful to her trust, like friends and like brethren, kind we were and just. But now with Northern treachery attempts our rights to mar, we'll hold so high the monument flag that bears a single star. Hurrah, hurrah, for Southern just go.
The wind's out of the southwest, blowing this way. Once the front passes, even though the rain's passed, the front hasn't passed yet. Once the front passes, it's going to turn around and blow the opposite direction. And then it's going to start getting cold.
Hello. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming and bringing the sunshine. Hallelujah. Yes. Welcome to the 40th annual Brooksville Raid. We are delighted you're here and you're going to be happy that you came. My name's Joe Curtright and I'm with the 7 Pounds of Bacon Mess Band, and unfortunately we were not able to play today because of the rain. When you have 70-year-old instruments, you don't take them out in the weather. And we apologize profusely. But we tried to entertain you a little bit with some of our CD cuts and some period music. And we're glad you came. And if you like what you heard, we do have a few CDs, 500 or 600 or something like that. But anyway, we're going to get ready for the battle. You saw the Federals come out and march across the field. That first group you saw in the white pants and the blue shell jackets with the white accoutrements, those were U.S. Marines. And there were quite a number of U.S. Marines that fought with the Federals. Many times in Florida you would have seen U.S. Marines just getting off of some of the boats and coming ashore. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm not sure where the Confederates are. I believe they're forming up over on the south end of the field. But we're glad you came. How many of you here for the first time? Raise your hand. Wow, thank you for coming. We hope that you'll be returning. How about those of you that are back for a second time, or a third time, 4 times, 5 times? Very good. Well, glad you came. Oh, there is some mischief over to the south. Some Confederates are forming up on the other side of the town there, and which is right now occupied by Union forces. That group out to the north guarding the north side of town, those are New York Zouaves. They are chasseurs from the 14th Brooklyn. We kind of, there were no New York units, the 14th Brooklyn in Florida, but it's just to give you an idea of some of the variety of units that were formed up during the war between the states, or if you're of the northern persuasion, the Civil War. Those of us born in the South, raised in the South, we called that war the war between the states. Some of the hardcores called it the War of Northern Aggression. But I would imagine the Confederates are going to try to push them out of that town. There's a federal unit formed up, and they're marching, possibly to leave.
Get out of there, you Yankees.
There were a number of coastal towns in Florida that were occupied by federal forces. Like I said, there were a lot of landings on the east and west coast. Soldiers would come into the area, and because most of the men of age were already mustered into units and fighting in Virginia, in the Eastern Theater and the Western Theater, Tennessee, and the Trans-Mississippi Theater, which would have been west of the Mississippi River. The towns were occupied by young boys and girls and mothers and grandmothers and some older senior gentlemen. Many of those towns were not protected. If they had a militia, it was certainly not formidable to resist the federal occupation. So that you're aware, Florida had a high percentage of federal loyalists. Even though Florida was the third state to secede from the Union, there were a lot of Floridians that did not want to secede, and so they were loyal to the Union. However, per capita, Florida supplied more soldiers to the Confederacy than any other state in the Confederacy.
Wow.
South Carolina was the first state to secede after the bombing and the shelling of Fort Sumter in 1861 in the spring.
Stand their ground.
South Carolina being the first. Alabama was the second, and then Florida seceded. Then Georgia and Mississippi and on, till 11 states eventually seceded. There were many small skirmishes in Florida, basically resistance to those landings along the coast. But the largest of all of the conflicts in Florida occurred in North Florida, about 60 miles west of Jacksonville. A federal army marched out of Jacksonville, which was held by the Union, down the rail line, which is still there, US 90, I-10, that area. They marched from Jacksonville, and they were met in Baker County between the town of Sanderson and Lake City in Columbia County. And the largest battle occurred there in the state of Florida, the Battle of Olustee. Olustee has preserved that battlefield, so it's a state battlefield that you can visit.
and it's just east of Lake City, right into Baker County on US 90. When the Federals tried to attack, coming down that railroad line, units from Georgia and Florida, and some reserve units from Florida, an infantry reserve, held the Union, basically defeated them and sent them back down the rail line to Jacksonville. That was in February of 1864. And because they were able to stop the Federals, they basically saved Tallahassee being captured and occupied by Union forces. Additionally, the Federals had a landing in St. Marks on the St. Marks River, which is south of Tallahassee on the Gulf Coast. They marched up close to Tallahassee, but they were met with the 2nd Florida Cavalry and the cadets from Tallahassee, and they were stopped there and sent back down to the coast, thus keeping Tallahassee the only southern capital, Confederate capital, from being occupied and taken by Union forces.
Oh yeah, I see him. Let him have it, Jim.
Don't let run anywhere.
You'll notice the Confederate unit on the left is shoulder to shoulder. The unit on the right has intervals between. That's the skirmish line. They deployed as skirmishers. The unit on the left is in a normal battle formation. Normally, a Civil War company, Federal or Confederate, was made up of approximately 100 men. They were called a company, and they had a company commander, usually a captain, or at least a first or second lieutenant. However, a unit could be commanded by a first sergeant.
Look out.
So they'd have a captain, a first lieutenant, a second lieutenant, a first sergeant, several other sergeants below the rank of first sergeant, some corporals, and then the rest privates.
Cavalry's going headed out there.
In a larger formation, 3 or more
They were hiding.
companies of 100 would be grouped together to form a battalion.
Yeah, I recognize that stance anywhere.
Then they formed several battalions together, and that would have been called a regiment. A regiment consisted of at least 10 companies, with 100 men in each company, so you're talking 1,000 men in a regiment. There were many regiments mustered in Florida, starting with the 1st Florida all the way up that I'm familiar with, the 8th Florida. And each of those regiments, approximately 1,000 men. There were more than that, because Florida basically supplied around 14,000 soldiers to the Confederacy for a period of 5 years. There was a company formed in this area. The 3rd Florida Wildcats was formed in Hernando County and commanded by Captain Hope. Other companies north of here would have been the Regiment of Company G. You see these fast shooters down on the spectator line on the west side of the field. bodyguard is shooting what's known as a Spencer rifle, a repeating rifle. They can fire 16, I believe, maybe 17, I could be wrong there. But they have to reload. The Confederates, after the Battle of Chickamauga, called rifles, the rifles they could load on Monday and shoot till Sunday. Now the field piece that's here is a Gatling gun. There was not a lot of use of that. Abraham Lincoln felt that it was a pretty inhumane weapon. If ever on the field, it would have been later. It was a late invention. So what you're observing right in front of you right now is infantry units. Those infantry units were known to march 20 miles a day. When they were on the march, they carried everything that they wanted and needed on their backs in a knapsack. The camps that you saw back in the Federal and Confederate camps, those would have been camps that would have been established during a time when they weren't on the move. They didn't march year-round. They didn't battle year-round. So those tents, it would be kind of tough if you were moving 20 miles today to carry that tent in those camps. So most of them slept under blankets or what was known as a dog tent. The dog tent was a small tent, flat, put together, and two guys would form a pup tent or a dog tent and sleep under that. Because that was small enough that they could pack. And they could get holes from the woods around them and be able to sleep under cover. But late war, many of the soldiers didn't even have those. So they would cover themselves with gum blankets, which was a rubberized canvas, or with a wool blanket. Confederate units over on the south side formed up. You'll notice that they're carrying the what most people call the Confederate flag. That's a misnomer. It's a battle flag. It was used as a regimental flag as a point to rally the troops. When you had a regiment in one formation, the colors were always stationed in the center of the regiment. 5 companies on one side, 5 on the other. And the colors were an indication of where the soldiers would rally and march to. When the regimental formation marched out in one long battle line, the colors would advance 6 paces, and then the whole regiment could keep the interval between the colors and maintain a uniform line. The way they did that was through constant drilling. All those times that they were in camp and not on the march and engaged with the enemy, they would drill in camp. So they became very efficient. You could always tell a young company or new recruits because they had a tough time during the battle, maintaining their composure. Their senior company members would basically take care of them, keep them in line. Became efficient at that. When they formed up, if they were on the march and needed to face to their right or to the left, there were commands that were given that would move an entire regiment into battle lines very quickly. And when you're talking 10,000 men, that's quite a feat. So they drilled and drilled and drilled so that it became second nature. When they would wheel, it would be like a big gate. So the whole regiment or the whole company would be turning on the which that would enable them to make a right or a left. They can also stop and face either right or left. Being one or they can fall into line by files and just form a regimental battle line in a matter of minutes. The weapons they're using today are replicas, reproductions of the original. Many of them replicas of the Enfield musket, a 58 caliber musket that's rifled. It's got rifle in the barrel. During the American Revolution, the rifles weren't rifled. They were just muskets, smooth-bore muskets that shot a round ball. Primed and ignited by a flint. So the flintlock could misfire frequently. One of the technological improvements which made battle lines much more devastating was percussion cap rifle muskets. It would increase the range of a musket by 500 or 600 yards.
Flanking them. You're in trouble.
It took several steps to load that musket, but it was a single-shot weapon. So you'll notice that the soldiers have leather sleeves and leather belts, and on the right side you'll see a leather pouch that's about 8 inches by 10 inches. That is the cartridge box. That cartridge box is full of wrapped rounds. On the front of their right side of their belt, they have a smaller little pouch called the cap box. That's where they keep the custom caps that ignite the powder to extract the projectile. So in order to load that musket after they shoot, they've got to bring the musket down, reach into their cartridge box, pull out a cartridge, tear the top of it if they had teeth, pour the gunpowder down the barrel, drop the projectile in the barrel, and then paper in the body, ram it with their ramrod. Then they can bring the musket up, pull the hammer back to half cock, and take the percussion cap out of their cap box, place it on the cone or the nipple of the musket, then pull it back to full cock, and now they're ready to fire. Civil War soldier during that time who was well-drilled, disciplined, could probably get 3 rounds per minute by shooting and reloading, shooting and reloading. The company commanders have a series of firing commands. One firing command would have been fired by company. The entire company is loaded to the ready, which means their muskets are up in front of their torso. Then he would give the command, aim, fire, and then the whole company would fire. Unfortunately for that, it left them in a very vulnerable position. Unfortunately for the enemy across the field, it was a pretty devastating volley. Then another really effective and popular firing command was fire by files. If you'll notice, you'll see this company coming up on the right. They're in a single file. Normally they would be in 2 lines with a front rank and a rear rank. And each pair, front and rear, file. So the company commander could call fire by files from either the left or the right. And the first file on the left or right, depending on the call, would bring their muskets up and shoot, recover arms. The second file would bring their muskets up and shoot, recover arms. The third file and the fourth file, all the way down. So you've got a constant barrage of firing towards the enemy. Now, once that any of the soldiers that had just fired would go ahead and reload, and they were just independent fire at will. So that kept constant fire on the enemy. It could also, the battalion commander could call fire by battalion. These reenactors you see are carrying weapons that they purchased. They're primitive weapons, so they're not considered a firearm in the sense of modern technology of firearms. They purchase all their uniforms. You'll notice the Union is a pretty uniform in their wear. Mostly sky blue pants and the navy blue or federal blue sack coats. Sack coat's a coat that comes down to about the thigh. You'll notice a lot of Confederates are wearing shorter jackets. They're also wearing a variety of different colors. The main reason for that was when companies were mustered in certain areas, possibly a wealthy businessman or farmer or plantation owner would equip that company with uniforms. In early war, most of the Confederate uniforms were gray. As the war continued and resources became less and less scarce for the Confederacy, they went to commutation uniforms, and that would be different contractors making uniforms from whatever they could purchase. One of the more popular fabrics then was wool, but wool was expensive, and so they started making the uniforms out of a combination of wool and cotton, and that was known as jean wool or cotton jean. Those are the lighter gray and the brick browns and the beige colored jackets. Those are a cotton blend. So they would make those jackets because it took less fabric than to make a long sack coat. Now the infantry is the largest portion of the Federal and Confederate Army. They also had two other branches of the Army, the cavalry and the artillery. Now you notice on the Confederate side, you can see those guns pretty good. Those are full-scale models. One of them or two of them, any of them could be originals, but those are full-scale Napoleon and other manufactured guns. The small ones that you saw during the artillery competition earlier today, those were mountain howitzers, or just howitzers. They called them mountain howitzers because they were easy to transport. You didn't need a full team of horses. They were smaller guns that could be redeployed quickly by 4 men, but the howitzers could be broken down. The barrels could be mounted on a pack mule. The carriages could be mounted on a pack mule, and they could move them with 2 to 3 mules up very steep inclines and grades. It was harder to do with the larger guns, which required at least a 4-horse team to pull the limber in the field piece itself. Now, they sought a variety of different armament ordinances. Some exploding shells, time fuses that they would shoot over the top of the enemy formation, and they would explode above them with shrapnel and any kind of destructive metal. And canister shot and grape shot were like shotgun shells, and then they just had solid shot. Normally the artillery was staged much further back from the battle line because they had a range of 3,000 to 5,000 yards. So but they were many times an enemy formation could take over a battery. A battery is a group of guns. In the Confederate Army, 4 was a common number for the number of guns in a battery. The Union would be 6 to 8 guns in a battery. All commanded by a battery commander. Each gun would have a gunner. As you notice, as they load, they send one of the gun crew back to the limbers or caissons to get around. He's called the powder monkey. He hands it around to one of the gunners, the implements. We have a rammer with a sponge on one end, and then the second implement is a pole with a worm on it. Once they insert the round and it's rammed into the breech, they have another crew member that has a wire pin called a prick. They will go through the vent hole and puncture or prick the round to expose the charge. Then they insert a friction primer down in the vent, attach a lanyard to it. Now they're ready to fire. A battery commander or an artillery commander could give commands for each of the guns to fire at will or fire in sequence in intervals that they would say fire by the left, 2-second intervals, 3-second intervals. He also determines what shot to use, what ordnance to use. He determines how long the fuse should be. Because once it's fired, it would ignite a fuse that would burn as the artillery ordnance was overhead. And when the fuse exploded that shell, that's when it did the damage.
Keep them hot. Load on them. Get your place. Don't worry about the mule. It's a pistol.
An infantry unit took a field piece, they would do what we call spike the gun. If they couldn't turn the gun and shoot against the enemy retreating, then they would do what was known as spike the gun. They would ruin the vent so it couldn't be fired again. Ensure that there were some guns that were taken and utilized by the enemy. There was no way to do that. They would just spike them until they were unusable. The third branch of the military, the Federal and Confederate armies, was the cavalry. Cavalry were horse-mounted, and their main purpose was for reconnaissance, for bringing intelligence to the commanders. So they would test the strength and location and movement of the enemy armies and report back to the commanders, the generals, and the colonels. And that was their main goal, was to keep their command structure informed of the strength and direction and location of the other army. However, they did come to face-to-face fights. Not many cavalry battles took place. A cavalry unit would hesitate to charge an infantry unit, especially if you're charging a battalion with multiple rifles loaded. You're on horseback charging at full speed. All it takes is 100 rifles to put 50 or so horses on the ground. But they did fight, and what would happen is, as a cavalry unit was similar to an infantry unit, only they were on horseback, they would ride in groups of 4. And the troopers, when the command was given, when they had located a unit, and definitely in the situation where they're going to have to fight, one of the troopers would take the reins of three of the horses. Those three troopers would dismount, and then they fought similar to infantry units. Now their guns were different. They all carried pistols. Many of them carried more than one pistol, and they would carry multiple cylinders for their pistols. And their rifles were many times a carbine that was smaller, shorter rifle, Spencer rifles. But they did dismount and fight as infantry. So on the federal side, you see three distinct uniform styles. On the Confederate side, more than a dozen. Now, I mentioned the flag earlier. There's a lot of misconception about that battle flag. And that gets to be a heated topic amongst different groups of people. For historians and for Southerners, that flag is a flag of honor, not a flag of racism. Many of their relatives that fought during that time died for that flag. And you'll notice that some of the flags, if you see them up close, they'll have engagements that they fought in. But that flag represented the soldiers. It's called the soldier's flag. And it wasn't meant to be used for what a lot of the hate groups are using it for now. The Federals carried the stars and stripes, and many of the regiments had a regimental flag that was designed by somebody of interest to that regiment, and so it might be a solid blue flag with a state seal of some kind in the center, fringed in gold. Confederacy adopted three different flags. The flag that's on the flagpole today is called the First National. And it was the first flag of the Confederacy. Some of them were 7-star cantons, that section of the blue. Some of them were 11, because there were 11 states that eventually seceded from the Union. And that flag is called the Stars and Bars, not the Stars and Stripes. And it got confusing during the fray of a battle with the smoke from the muskets and the artillery, and could easily be mistaken because of the design for the wrong side. So the Confederacy changed to a new flag, the Second National, which was called the Stainless Banner. It was a white flag with the canton of the small battle flag. So where the blue on the Federal and First National is, there was a small battle flag in that canton. Again, there were some commanders that didn't like the design of that because of it being white. It took on the appearance of a flag of surrender. So they redesigned that flag, and at the tail of the flag, they put a wide red bar. And that was the third national flag. When a regimental flag was captured by the enemy, that was quite a disturbing thing to happen to the regiment. They would fight to the end to preserve their flag. If you go to some of the museums, historical museums, you'll see flags that were captured or that were maintained after the war. They're in pretty bad shape now because they're over 150 years old.
Got his BB gun with him.
But you can visit them. There was a flag called the Hardy flag. That was a solid blue Confederate flag, a solid blue flag with a white disc in the middle, like a moon. And that flag appeared in the Western Theater. The Army of Tennessee, that flag was called the Hardy flag. Another very popular flag at the beginning of the war that was adopted is the Bonnie Blue. The Bonnie Blue flag started out as the flag of West Florida. Florida extended all the way to Louisiana as a territory. And so they had this flag that was a big blue flag with a very large white star. Well, that flag was so popular, it became the secession flag. And many of the states adopted that flag as their secession flag. Now we sing a song called Bonnie Blue. We didn't sing it today because of the rain. But we played that for you after the Federals marched across the field, the Bonnie Blue flag, and it's a song about all the states that seceded in the order they seceded. Other than the verse that says, "Next quickly Mississippi, Georgia, and Florida," they got that out of whoever wrote the song, and I forget his name. He put Florida after Mississippi and Georgia. Actually, Florida seceded after South Carolina and Alabama. There were a number of other actions in Florida during this time. Jacksonville, there were a number of naval actions on the St. Johns River. Down around the area of Palatka, there was a U.S. boat called the Columbine. Columbine was a side-wheeler, and it was equipped with guns, and it would patrol the St. Johns River, basically to stop trade, to stop Confederate goods and resources from being transported. Well, it came close to a place called Horse Landing, just south of the Ocklawaha River. And when they came near Horse Landing, Captain J.J. Dickinson, who they call the Swamp Fox of Florida, he was everywhere. He and his 2nd Florida Cavalry and one of the groups, either the Milton Light or the Marion Light Artillery, sunk the Columbine right there. But there was a lot more naval activity all along the coast. And the reason for that was that Florida was a place where seawater was being boiled down and converted to salt. Now you wonder, well, why did they want salt? It wasn't to salt their hamburgers. It was to preserve their meat. Pork and beef had to be salted to preserve it. So that was a very, very important resource since they didn't have refrigeration. Well, what would happen is the Federal Navy would send these excursions ashore to the salt works, and they would bust up the salt works, destroy them so that they couldn't convert the seawater to salt. So all along the East Coast, you can go, if you get into a historical Florida publication, you can look up those places. There was a very big salt works in Panama City area, Bay County, called St. Andrews, right on St. Andrews Bay. and there was quite a skirmish over that salt works. But eventually it was destroyed. There was one of the first battles of the Civil War was the Battle of Santa Rosa Island, and was occupied by Federals, and the Confederates tried to take over that fort. Because at the beginning of the war, everything was Federal. So when they fired on Fort Sumter, General Beauregard, firing on his military academy teacher of artillery, a guy named Anderson, he fired on his own teacher, and they abandoned Fort Sumter in 1861, April of 1861. And that's the match that started the fire that kept our country engaged for 5 years. The Civil War was a real ugly thing to happen in a country where brothers and brothers were fighting against each other, against cousins, against family. And the total casualties of that time recently has been increased by the introduction of new technology, ground technology, where they've been finding mass graves and places that they didn't know people were buried. Obviously, communication wasn't the greatest back then. It was basically newspapers and families. Some families that weren't near a place to report their loved ones not coming home, they wouldn't know if they had not made it home, if they had died in battle, if they got sick on the way home, if they died from sickness in camp. A lot of those casualties were from disease. But the projection 10 years ago was that there were 625,000 deaths as a result, American casualties as a result of the Civil War or the war between the states. That's more than all of our wars combined since the American Revolution and the French and Indian War all the way to Afghanistan. So if you think about that, that's more than our War of Independence, the Battle of 1812, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Iraq, Afghanistan. All those casualties added up do not total more than the casualties of the Civil War.
He can't make up his mind whether to be right-handed or left-handed.
So you'll notice on the battlefield, there are a number of casualties. People ask, well, how do they decide who's going to die, who's going to fall, who's going to be wounded, who's not going to get up? Well, if you run out of cartridges, you might as well take a hit because you can't play no more. But companies that drill together and play together, they have ways of making it look a little bit more authentic for you. You missed I don't see the hospital tent. They're gone, I believe. Surgeon Dan and Miss Shelley. But yesterday, they had a surgeon that was amputating arms, legs, and toes, doing bullet extractions. But I guess they had to leave because they were set up under those oak trees. Unless you're here, Mr. Dan, wave at me. I want to see you. These Civil War reenacting units are like family. There is a unit for everybody that's interested in history, in this part of the history of our country, and that like this kind of recreation. You can put together a Civil War kit over a period of time. It's a lot cheaper than owning a boat, I'll tell you that. But a lot of the units will have spare gear, and if somebody shows an interest, then they'll loan that gear to somebody for as long as it takes for that individual to purchase his clothing and his weaponry. And that way they can find people that are interested in the hobby. and you can meet with them. They'll be packing up to get home today, but
Recall.
I believe that's a ceasefire.
Recall.
Maybe they're tired of hearing me.
Well, ceasefire and recall. That means quit shooting and come back.
Cease narration. Gentlemen, please uncover for taps. If you would stand, if you're able.
That'll take me a half an hour to get rid of the chip.
Now these gentlemen are going to do something that's only been done in the history of our civilization. They are going to resurrect. How about a hand for the Armies of North and Southeast Reenactor volunteers that come out here at their own expense? And for the Brooksville Raid Committee, 40th annual Brooksville Raid. Started out at the museum in Brooksville, went to the Grubbs Farm for 10 years, and been on Sertoma Ranch since then. And we are grateful that you came today. Give yourselves a hand too. Thank you so much.